This conversation is something that I have personally figured out, I guess I will say, and in some respects started to work on. And I thought, why not share this with you and see if maybe you will find some value to it. So, as you know, I'm Chris Williams, the #1 podcast for helping corporate professionals find and build and sustain a perfect side business. One of the things that I want to do is really quickly share with you that I have some incredible things coming up, some incredible announcements, and stay tuned for that. Make sure you go to the website, www.twac.live. You will find a ton of information there. But this conversation has been something that's been in my brain at least the last 2.5 weeks. And I said, why not get together? And I want to talk through it, but I want to make sure that like I provide some value on what we can do together in order to get really good at this one thing. Now you see the title, but I want to kind of share something that I've noticed. One of the things that when I read, different books, or if I talk to different people, or if I just watch certain people and see how they do things, I'm going to tell you the #1 skill that I have seen that has separated people, whether it means they're going to have, a good experience in whatever their venture is right now, their career, their day job, their business, their entrepreneurship journey, whatever the case may be. It's one thing that I think sometimes we don't understand the power of it, right? And some of us don't understand why this is such a good thing that our children learn to do very early often. To us as parents and adults, it gets very annoying, but I'm going to tell you, this is one of the greatest skills that can ever happen. So with that being said, I want to kind of walk through this. So here's what I have found. Here's what I have found. What I have found is the #1 thing that you and I, as comfort wanting but dream bigging adults, have to get better at is we really have to get better at this right here. We have to get better at asking questions. I'm going to tell you right now, some of the things that I have learned over time about asking questions has been mind-blowing to me. Like, I think, and to be quite honest with you, what I've learned more is how terrible I have been at that, right? How terrible I have been at that. Because here's what we typically do when we have children, right? So when we have kids, right, we have these moments and we're like, oh, that's awesome, they're talking, and then they're like, people come up with these crazy, ridiculous things, terrible twos and all of that. And then all of a sudden, the child starts being very inquisitive about life, not just with their hands, but with their mouth, right? And they go from putting everything in their mouth to actually asking questions. And for the first few years, right, it's awesome, it's cute. But then after a while, you're like, man, would you please stop asking so many questions? But here's the interesting part. I personally believe many of us have failed at getting really good at asking questions, and it's probably costing us more in our life than we know. So I remember being a kid, and the one thing my mother used to say to me all the time was, Chris, stop asking so many questions. Now, there's a reason to that, right? Some of the reasons that I realize that some of us don't like people asking us questions is because maybe one of the reasons why I realize people don't like asking people asking a lot of questions is because they don't have the answers. And because you don't have the answers, you don't like questions. Another reason I've seen that people don't like when people ask a bunch of questions is because they probably just don't want to lie. right? Sometimes your kids will ask certain questions that you're like, you know what? Stop asking, right? Because I just don't want to lie to you, right? Or as adults, we get into relationships, they become deep, and there might be some sticking points, and we don't want to answer those because, we're a little touchy. Another reason I've seen is because people are afraid to tell the truth. Sorry. Here's the other thing that I've noticed. It's not just that they don't have the answers, or sometimes we don't want to lie, or sometimes we're just afraid to tell the truth. You know what the really interesting part is? This probably should have been obvious, right? We don't like being asked a lot of questions. Now, here's the interesting thing about this last one. And I know you're like, well, Chris, that's kind of obvious. That's the reason why you're talking about this. But I want us to kind of think about our own lives for a second and just start asking ourselves, why don't you like being asked a lot of questions? Is it potentially arrogance? Right? Is it some sort of attitude, right, that you have towards um questions being asked to you? Do you think you're, above certain people? Right? Like what's I'm just saying I think sometimes we got to ask ourselves why do some of us get defensive, right? Some of us get defensive when people ask us questions. Some of us get angry, right? Um some of us get very uncomfortable. What's the reason? I'm just saying let's start asking ourselves, some of these reasons, right? What's the reason? Do you see yours listed here? Like, what's the real reason that you don't like questions? Because I do think if we learn the power of questions, we would actually be open to them. Now, I want to kind of share this because I think this is something important. Here's the funny thing about questions, right? Questions, you gotta look at the word. Do you know what questions are? Questions are just a quest for answers. It's just a quest for answers. I'm not saying you don't get that. I am saying sometimes I think what we do is we put on our automatic defensive defaults because somebody starts asking us a line of questions, right? But do you know something I've learned in my own relationship with my wife? If I can just tell you, if I learn to ask the right questions, we actually could end up in a whole lot of better situations. What do I mean? Well, let me kind of share some thoughts here, okay? And I just want you to think about you, right? Like you don't have to don't use me. Like put yourself in the mindset. Like think about how in the world could you improve your relationships? How could you improve your life, your career with this one skill? Well, let me just go back to my relationships, right? So if I'm being honest, one of the difficult things that I've had to like, and I'm not a master at it, I just do it more often because I'm conscious of it. I'm making an intentional effort to ask my wife better questions, right? Because here's what I've learned. If I can ask better questions and if I have a quest for answers, what that means is I'm seeking to understand. This is my This is something it was a learned behavior from about 2.5 years of counseling about Chris. I am honestly asking certain questions because I'm really just seeking to understand. By the way, when somebody asks you a few questions and a line of questions, maybe you said something that, guess what it does? Maybe in the first question, you got to understand, what did you do? You might have piqued their curiosity. I'm sorry, but that's a good thing. That's actually a good thing. That maybe you and I were in the middle of a conversation and I asked you a particular question, but it gave me a train of thought and I wanted to learn more. That means I find you interesting. And because I find you interesting, or the moment interesting, right? It means that I want to ask more questions because you are piquing my curiosity, right? But here's the crazy part. We don't even see these yet as a positive thing in our relationships because we run from people asking us questions. But if you understood that a question is just a quest for answers, and that you're actually doing these things when they are asking you questions, you'd realize this is my ultimate goal in life. My ultimate goal is a deeper connection. That's my ultimate goal. But do you know something, y'all? I will never have this if I don't go on a quest for answers. Do you realize that if you read the Bible, there are questions that all of those in the Word of God who were seeking to understand. Maybe they had some hesitancy in some of their questions, but they might have piqued their curiosity and they just found it was interesting. So, okay, I got to follow. Let's go. Do you know sometimes that like what I want to ultimately be able to do is be able to ask the right questions though, so that we don't get defensive, right? Right here. So that we don't have this going on, so that we don't get defensive, we don't get angry, right? That people don't feel uncomfortable. And here's what I figured out about questions, okay? So let's move down here. Here's what I figured out about questions. Questions not only push us in certain directions, but questions also, learning how to ask the right questions is a maturation process. Because typically people ask questions in a particular format. So we either ask yes or no questions, right? Those yes or no questions are going to give you a yes or a no answer, right? But then you know what we do? We get angry with the person who we're asking yes and no questions to, but we didn't learn how to ask a better question so that it would actually create conversation. Let's just put this out here. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and you're asking them questions, but they're only giving you yes or no answers, right? Maybe it's your kids. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's your boo thing. And you've been asking them questions over and over and over again, right? And then you've ever heard yourself say out loud, do you have anything else to say besides yes or no? Interesting. We're upset with the person who's answering our yes or no questions with just yes or no, instead of saying, maybe I should get better at asking them a better question. I'm just wanting to challenge us on what we're really after. Yes, it would be nice that every person we ran across would be open to just a prompt and just go down a rabbit hole. But can I be honest with you? The people who do that, you don't like it all the time. You ask them one question and they open up Pandora's box and tell you a full-page letter about their life and everything else. And you're like, man, I just asked one question. So my point is if you ever found yourself frustrated because you feel like somebody won't share more in the questions that you're asking, there's a hint. We probably should get better at asking questions. Okay, so some of us ask yes or no questions. Some questions we're asking, I want to tell you about these. These are interesting questions. They have preloaded answers. How many of you have ever had somebody or you found yourself asking questions and you already had preloaded answers? Right? So you're asking a question, but in the line of your question, you already provided them the answer. So they just use that answer. I just want you to think about how we look at questions. Think about that for a second. Right? So you might be talking to somebody or you're trying to, get more out of somebody, right? And you're asking a question, but you didn't really ask a question. You gave a preloaded answer. The answer was in the question. Hey, listen, if you're enjoying this episode, and I know you are, there's something that you could help me out with. So right now I am looking for couples, yes, couples who do business together and have a thriving, successful business. Do you know somebody? Does somebody come to mind? Well, great. Here's what I would like for you to do. Make sure that you share this episode, or down below, there is actually a form that they can fill out and let us know a little bit about their business and what they actually do together. And guess what? You might be the reason that they're actually a guest right here on the World According to Chris podcast. That's right. You could be that reason. So if you know a couple who does business together and does pretty well, I'd love to be able to have them on the show and talk with them so that we can all learn together, because I am sure you're probably wondering, man, is it possible for me and my lady to actually build a business together? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, my wife and I are doing it together and we are absolutely loving it. But there are so many more couples and I want to make sure that we highlight them. And I know you know some. So go ahead, let me know down below. Also, make sure that you get them the form down below and make sure that they fill it out. Let's get back to the episode. So tell me about, how you do this thing. I noticed that the way you do it is you seem to do X, Y, and Z. Well, you just gave them a preloaded question or preloaded answer inside of your question. You know what the key is? Let me show you the key. The way to avoid this, don't assume. Don't assume. Just do your best to learn how to honestly think about what you're after. You got to really think about what you're after. A better way to put it would be intention. Some of us have to watch our intentions, because some of us approach conversations already in a defense mode or an attack mode, right? And so the other person is feeling the aggression, the tone, the way you're coming at them, while you're even asking your question. So you got to start asking yourself, if you got preloaded answers, well, don't get upset if they give you the preloaded answer. You just preloaded the question with the answer, right? Don't assume. What is your intention, right? So we got yes, no type of questions. We got questions with preloaded answers, right? Here's a better version. A better version would be, you've heard of these before, open-ended. Now, an open-ended question might seem, it might seem like, what's the point of me asking an open-ended question, right? If I already know what I want to know. I think one of the most powerful tools at our disposal is to ask open-ended questions that forces the person to think and forces you to listen. Let me just write this down because it's really important. Open-ended questions should force thought and force listening. That's the whole point of an open-ended question, y'all. The whole point of asking open-ended questions is so that it will force thought on the person that you ask the question, and it will force listening on your part, because a good open-ended question will cause a pause. And silence is okay. We get afraid of silence. We become fearful of open air. And can I tell you something? Silence is one of the most powerful things, because if you're in a conversation and you really have good intention and you really want to learn something and you are trying to have dialogue, and let me go back, and what you're after is right here. If you're after a deeper connection, right? Let me go back. If you're after deeper connection here, right? If this is your quest and you're on a quest for answers, you're seeking to understand, they pique your curiosity, and you find what they have to say interesting. Well, it will force thinking and it will force you to listen. Right? So here's a couple things that I have found to be pretty cool about asking the right questions, right? There's been some studies that have been shown where in the realm of asking questions, there's a lot of things you can do, right? Like you can ask rapid fire questions. You've seen this like back in the days with all the speed dating stuff, right? Rapid fire, ask a bunch of questions. You've seen it on other podcasts. You've seen it in certain surveys, right? They're just asking you all these different questions, right? You even seen where certain questions are asking, you think they're unrelated, like on an application or something else. And you're like, why do they ask me, what do I, think is the most appropriate way to say, July through September? Is it autumn or fall? There's behavioral science behind certain questions, right? So you've seen people ask certain questions, right? You've even seen where Oprah will ask the question of her guest and she was not expecting what came as a result. You've seen it. If you don't know the Oprah effect by now, go pull up some of Oprah's best or some of her interviews. Pick any interview. Pick them. And don't just watch it because that's a favorite person of yours. Watch how the way she formats her questions and the way she shows up in an interview and the way she gets the person to relax, and watch how when she finally gets to the deeper question, she already has their trust. Ooh, that's a big word, right? There's a word. Here's the interesting part. The interesting part is, if I'm really on a quest for answers and a deeper connection, do you know something? Here's the crazy part. This is the cool part. This is the cool part. What I'm really after is trust. I'm after trust, y'all. I want to know, can we trust each other when I'm asking you a question? Right? I'm after building a real relationship. I'm really seeking to understand. So, one of the crazy things I figured out that has helped me throughout my life and my career, I don't mind asking anybody questions. I don't care who you are, because here's the most interesting thing. People get really hung up on, I don't want to ask a dumb question. People say that all the time. You ever heard somebody say that? Have you like you go somewhere, or you're on a Zoom, or you're in a meeting, and the expert's at the front of the room, or somebody's sharing some information, and they're like, well, I don't want to ask a dumb question, or I don't mean to make a dumb question, but no question is dumb. Y'all, so my wife and I are in two masterminds. And the one thing I will do is I will ask a bunch of questions, because I don't care about the title. I don't care about who the person say they are. None of that really matters to me. You know what matters to me? Do I get it? Do I understand it? And, there's two ways of learning. One, you have to teach it. And if you can teach it, then you've mastered it. But two, you got to ask questions. By the way, some of us seek a deeper connection, but don't want people asking us questions. So I don't know how we improve our business relationships with our business partners, with our community, with our customers, with our spouses, without us asking better questions. And by the way, being comfortable with people asking us more thought-provoking questions. Questions that make us uncomfortable. Questions that force us to think. Questions that might make our armpits sweat. But man, don't you feel alive when somebody actually asks you a question that you never been asked before? Doesn't it make you walk away thinking like, man, that person asked me a question I've never been asked about in my life? Do you know you have sat down and watched interviews? You listen to podcasts. You listen to this one. You listen to the World According to Chris podcast, and you've seen me do interviews, or you watch your favorite podcast person who sits down and conducts an interview, and you listen to the answers of the people that they're interviewing. Well, I don't know how else that person would be able to get good at asking questions so that it's good for you as the audience to listen if they aren't having a quest for answers, and if they're not seeking a deeper connection, if they're not getting better at asking better questions. And obviously, the guest has opened themselves up to a line of questions that might either make them uncomfortable, or they've never been asked before, or cause them to think. And I would also submit to you that the reason they're on that show is because they're open to it. So how can we leverage questions, right? How can we get better at the questioning world and find ourselves open to it, right? Well, um, let's go back to the whiteboard. How can we get better at this? Well, I want to kind of talk about a couple of things that I have found to be interesting. And I tell you what, I'm gonna go to a different corner here. So here's some things that I have found that make it a little easier for me to start asking better questions. I think the first thing is, this might be obvious, but you really got to be curious. I think it's a shame when we operate in a vein of life that says everything I know right now is enough for the rest of my life. I have watched us as humans, as people. I've done it. There was a period of time in my life where I literally would get up, go to work, come home, be at home, go to church, do a couple of outings, get up, go to work, come home, watch TV, get up, go to work, because I was operating with this ridiculous assumption that everything I know right now is good enough for the rest of my life. I wasn't curious about anything. I had to first be curious. The second thing I had to be willing to do? This one might hurt. I got to learn to question my current norms. Like my current ones. I promise you this, from age 20 to age 30, from age 30 to age 50, from age 50 to age 60, from 60 to 70, from 70 to 80. I think the people who are actually human beings instead of human doing, humans actually being and humans who actually just do tasks every day, I think the difference honestly is that they are willing to question themselves and ask very hard questions. Hey, I know you're enjoying this episode and I want to say thank you, but if you're like the people that I know, and I think I know you pretty well, you're actually enjoying this and there's other people like you who would like to know that this is something that you pay attention to. So guess what? I need you to hit the subscribe button, but also hit the notifications bell so that way you always know when we're dropping something new. But also, which is more important, share this with somebody that you know is interested in this type of conversation and content, because I guarantee you will add a level of understanding and communication that you probably are looking for from those individuals anyway. And the other cool part is you all will be learning together. So go ahead and subscribe, hit the notifications bell now. And guess what? You'll constantly be reminded of when we drop new content like what you're watching right now. Let's get back to the episode. I remember asking myself before, so this is real talk. Before I lost 65 pounds, I had to ask myself some really important questions. The first question I had to ask myself is, okay, Chris, why do you wear all baggy clothes? Some of it was my upbringing because I grew up in the hood. But a lot of it was the same thing I thought that was like the cool dress approach was also allowing me to expand in my waist and in my weight because it would hide it. I'm just giving you me. I'm not telling you you have to. I am saying you got to get better at asking yourself questions. Why do you keep wearing those? Why are you uncomfortable in a suit? What makes you eat all day long? Why do you feel like you have to go into a food coma with every meal? All right. I'm just saying, like, these are things I had, and it was, I didn't start asking myself before I started like really getting in. I started having to ask it because my trainer had to ask me certain questions, and I had to be open to that line of questioning. I had to be open to him challenging my norms. And his line of questioning and challenging my norms helped me lose 65 pounds. I'm just saying, I think it's I think it's very interesting. I wish I could interview people who really made real change happen in their life. Because I guarantee you this, it might have started with a question. It might have started with them looking at their current world and going, something about this is either making me frustrated or uncomfortable, or I need to change. And they started down the path. The questions led them down a slope, a slippery slope of finding answers and creating solutions in their own life. So, all right, there's that one. So, first, you got to be curious. Secondly, we got to question my current norms. Here's the third one. And this, hold up, sorry. This third one is something that, I don't know. Let me write it down and then I'll kind of explain it. The third thing you got to do is, how do I want to write this? I'm going to say write it different ways. You have to question the questions that you currently ask. What I mean is like have someone else say it differently. Like, take the questions that you were asking and take it to somebody and go, hey, I'm trying to ask this question. Give me some other ways I could ask this question. Because again, if you operate with the assumption that everything you know right now is enough to live a full, vibrant life the rest of your life, that is a horrible assumption. The prophet Drake once said, everybody dies, but not everybody lives. It was in a song that he did with, I think it was Nicki Minaj. And no truer is that in today's world than ever before. Because social media tells us, hey, pick up your phone and live your life through other people. We never stop to do number two and question our current norms. Why am I so focused on the life that they live in and where they been and what they wear and what they dress and how they did this and what show they was on and what they said here and how they showed up at this, 15-second Instagram viral thing and whatever? Why am I more understanding of that than my own current reality right now? I don't know. Anyway, okay. So you got to be curious. You got to question my own current norms. And then you got to write those questions different ways, right? You got to start writing things down. I believe that the written word is the most powerful thing on the planet. It is how everything that you and I have, from this Apple Pencil to this screen to everything that you are currently, your house, your car, your phone, everything, somebody wrote the idea down and made it plain, and thus it became to be, right? They spoke it, they wrote it down, they started taking action on it. It started to formalize. Now you have it, right? So I believe that you gotta write things down. But then here's something that I also think is powerful. Because if we can master these, I think we can open ourselves up. If you're gonna be curious and question your current norms and write things down differently, here's what happens as a result. you end up changing your default. Did you know that right now, our brains, the only things that matter to our brain is to actually stay safe? That's it. Our brains don't want anything else. Low energy activity, so it wants to create routines, because the more routine something is, the less brain power it has to use, and it's looking for being safe. Well, there are certain questions that people have asked me before that did not make me feel safe at all. That made me feel way uncomfortable. But it was the best thing I ever needed, because up until that point that person asked me that question, I hadn't really even thought about that when it came to myself. When I am sitting and listening at church to my pastor, I have learned to have a different intention with listening to the message. Granted, many of us have, we listen and we're super inspired by the word. What I'm starting to listen for is internally, what questions is it forcing me to ask of myself when I am listening to the word being preached? What am I having to ask myself as a result of what I am hearing right now? That's me. I'm not saying that should be everyone. I am saying, if you want to get, if you really want to have life and life more abundantly, I personally believe that it's going to take questioning where you are right now, so that you can change your default of comfort, so that you can actually start having new experiences, so that you can start having real life well lived. And it sounds like that, obviously you're watching this on the replay or watching this live. Sounds like that's kind of what you want to, right? I think that's what we all want at the end of the day. We want that for ourselves. But we can't want the end result without going through the process of what it takes to get there. So there's that side. So, all right, let me go back. All right, so 4 things I have for you. Be curious, question my current norms, write it in different ways, and changing your default. It will happen as a result of doing the first 3, right? So just to recap, my personal belief is that we all have to get better at asking the right questions. Some people get afraid of it because we don't, have the right answers. We don't want to we don't want a lot of people. We're afraid to tell the truth. We don't like being asked a lot of questions for attitude, some sort of ways that we think of ourselves higher than we probably should be. And then some of us just get defensive and angry and we get uncomfortable. But the truth of the matter is that we are in a quest for answers. That's why we have questions. And if you can't have, if you're not open to people asking you questions and not understanding that people are asking you questions from your 5-year-old all the way to your spouse and your job and wherever else, they're asking questions because they're seeking to understand. You pique the curiosity and they just might find you interesting. And hopefully you're after what everybody else is after, which is building a deeper connection so that we can trust each other. I don't know about you. This is a very powerful tool of asking questions, right? Again, don't ask yes or no questions. Don't preload answers within your question, right? Learn how to ask better questions, man. Like don't preload, don't assume, and be honest about your intentions when you approach people, when you have questions. I'm saying be honest with yourself. That way you can be honest with other people. Ask open-ended questions, man. It'll force thought and it'll force you to listen. And ultimately, when you do all of that, it allows you to be able to, in order to be able to do all that, you got to be curious. You got to ask, question your current norms. You got to write them in different ways. And you have to have Have someone look at your questions and ask them differently and change. It will change your default as a result. So listen, I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, leave a comment down below. If you are watching this on the replay, just put hashtag replay in the comments. Like, meaning if you see this as valuable, of something that I've said here about asking questions, then just put it down in the comments and just put hashtag replay, right? Or tag somebody that you think should actually watch this one. All right. So I've got a free resource for you. One of the things that I've been talking about recently and lately is about some of the things that I realized that we as employees are making mistakes on. And so if you can tap into that resource, if you go to www.twac.live/7mistakes, twac.live/7mistakes, and you will find the 7 biggest mistakes employees are making before getting fired, downsized, or laid off. All right. Really cool. It'll give you some information, give you some advice. Other than that, stay tuned. I got a lot of stuff coming up. Really great things happening in and around the channel. Big announcements coming soon, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you have found this of value, help me help everyone around you by sharing this with someone. Tell somebody about it. Leave a comment. Go leave a rating wherever you found this. Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you are seeing this. Make sure that you tell someone else or leave a comment, right? You can leave a comment below this conversation and how it may have impacted you and what are you going to do as a result of what you heard? How are you going to take one thing that we talked about today about learning to ask better questions that will improve your skill set in your life and your career? What are you going to do today, not next week? As you know, my favorite hashtag is massive action. So go take some massive action based on the conversation today. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been The World According to Chris. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Hey, I know you're enjoying this episode and I want to say thank you. But if you're like the people that I know, and I think I know you pretty well, you're actually enjoying this and there's other people like you who would like to know that this is something that you pay attention to. So guess what? I need you to hit the subscribe button, but also hit the notifications bell so that way you always know when we're dropping something new. But also, which is more important, share this with somebody that you know is interested in this type of conversation and content, because I guarantee you will add a level of understanding and communication that you probably are looking for from those individuals anyway. And the other cool part is you all will be learning together. So go ahead and subscribe, hit the notifications bell now. And guess what? You'll constantly be reminded of when we drop new content like what you're watching right now. Let's get back to the episode.